Hello everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. May the data be with you. New analytic strategies top service providers use now, sponsored by Calix. Before we begin, I wanted to cover a few housekeeping items. On the left-hand side of your screen is the Q&A box. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can type your question into the Q&A box and submit them to our speakers. All questions will be saved, so if we don't get to answer you, we may follow up via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. A copy of today's slide deck is available for download in the green resource list widget. Towards the end of today's presentation, we'll ask you for your feedback. A survey will already open on your screen and will only take 1 minute to complete. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I would now like to turn the event over to Heavy Reading's Research Director, Jim Hodges.
Thanks, operator, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. So today's webinar, as the title indicates, May the Data Be With You, we're really going to be focusing on service providers, analytic strategies, and really kind of look and drill down on what they're doing and how they're using data and what are some of their strategies to monetize and to really help them provide a better customer experience for that. So let me just kind of go through the agenda. We'll talk a little bit about the agenda. So what we're going to do is, as I said, we're going to really focus on service provider analytic strategies. We're going to really talk about data quality and collection, how they're using data to optimize their network, how they're using it in their business and marketing strategies. We'll also talk about some use cases, including how they're using analytics and data to understand the impacts of some of their service bundling. And then we'll also have a section on evolution of analytics. I should point out that all these sections that will be presented, the first part up front, are based on a research project that Heavy Reading recently completed with Calix to really look at service providers' analytic strategies for broadband service providers. And then once we've done that, in the second part of the presentation, we'll hear from Calix in terms of some of their strategies for supporting customers with business insights and consults as well. And then we'll wrap up and take your questions. So let me first introduce our speaker. So joining me today is Sam Acuff, who is the Vice President of Business Insight Services at Calix. Welcome, Sam. Looking forward to presenting with you. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Calix.
Thank you very much, Jim. So I came to Calix about 1.5 years ago to build a consultative service, helping our BSPs wade through their immense treasure trove of data to help them understand what that data story is telling them for actionable insights. So my team is a team of success managers and data scientists and data analysts that are there for our Calix customers to utilize for consultative services. And I was so excited about seeing the results of this research and being here today. So thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm glad you could join us. Okay, so let's talk about the projects. As I said, this is a research-driven project where we're going to be presenting some of the key findings and some of the data points going through this. So the research project that we worked on, Heavy Reading and Calix worked on, was really focusing on looking at North American and UK broadband service providers, so BSPs, and it was really designed to target C-level executives. And so these are executives who worked in various roles, engineering, sales, marketing, and they worked for BSPs that were serving 250,000 and fewer subscribers in Canada, United States, and UK. And just so you know, we also kind of, when we looked at, I'll be presenting the key findings and the key data points, but I'll also be filtering. So we filtered the data into 3 groups. Group 1, which is the kind of the smallest BSPs, 15,000 and less. Group 2, which is 15,000 to 24,999. And then this third group was 250,000 to 250. So we did this because we'll see there are some, sometimes subtle, sometimes even more profound differences in these 3 groups. So that's what we'll be doing for the first part. But we'll also talk about, in that, using this research to talk about service providers, these BSP strategies, trends, and how they're using analytics is kind of a key part of it. So as I said, this project, 20 survey question, it was recently completed in the fourth quarter of last year, so it's very recent, and it's exclusive in that it really targeted C-level. So we're really getting a really top level view of what executives are looking at in terms of how they leverage data and how they collect it and do that. So I'm going to first start with the section, and what I wanted to do is kind of start off with data quality and collection. So, as I said, this was a 20-question survey, so there are questions around a whole broad range of topics. But the first we started as in the survey was really trying to understand as a level set, how advanced are BSP data strategies? What data sources are they collecting? What are they analyzing? What about net promoter scores? How does that fit in? So I'm going to present a couple of key findings from the research, and I'll be bringing in Sam in a couple of charts to kind of give her thoughts, and also maybe some kind of give it extra color in terms of some of the customer experiences and stuff that she's doing on with 5 customers as part of her team. So this first chart is, we just simply asked them, what data sources do you currently collect and analyze? And we broke it down from KPIs, trouble ticket data, subscriber data, network alarms, performance, and subscriber loyalty, things like net promoter score. And we just asked them first, what do you currently collect and analyze? What do you collect but don't analyze? Or what information are you neither collecting or analyzing? And you can kind of see that based on what they're collecting and analyzing first, sort of the top 3 are, net promoter, or KPI data, trouble ticket data and subscriber data. This is things like usage, take rate, and consumption, even CSAT scores. And then network alarms, performance, the subscriber loyalty, NPS 37. So these are, you can kind of see that, there is kind of a broad range of information that they're already collecting and analyzing. The top 2 or 3 would be trouble ticket, and then number 1 would be KPI data. But to me, the other part of this is, they're still collecting a lot of data. If you look at that orange bar, there's a lot of data that they're collecting, but they don't analyze. And I think that's kind of the value proposition of how service providers and BSPs can leverage this data to help them with their network optimization, marketing strategies, and service excellence. So to me, that's kind of an interesting key point. And really, the one that stood out to me is that, at a maximum, BSPs are really only analyzing 52% of the less of the data that they currently collect. So I think there's, they believe that there's a lot of opportunity. We'll see that later on. But because of skill sets, a number of different reasons, opportunity, I think they're really only scratching the surface in terms of what they're able to accomplish with the data that they are collecting and analyzing. So I'm just going to go through the filter stuff really quickly here. So as I said, when you see group 1, think group 1 of BSPs, that's the smallest group. Group 2, that's the mid-size, and group 3, the largest group. And you can see here some subtle differences. KPI was kind of high in all 3 groups, but it was highest in the smallest and the middle groups, the middle-sized group. What's interesting is net promoter score, 52% in the largest group. That was something that they are collecting and analyzing more than their counterparts of 22% and 35%. So I think this, in any sort of service provider, different strategies, different competitive landscapes, there's different reasons for that. But I think that's just something that's interesting to me, is that the largest group kind of had a slightly or larger focus on NPS scores as well. So, and maybe Sam, let me kind of give myself a break here and kind of bring you in here. Do you kind of see something when you talk to customers? Can you sort of see what's happening in terms of data collection and analyzing the data? I think you're on mute, Sam.
It's really fascinating to me when we talk about data collection and data analysis. When I looked at that first chart that you showed, I see these buckets, and I see we have KPIs, and we have trouble ticket data, and we have NPS at the very bottom. What I find that's interesting is when you start doing analysis across those buckets, that's when it becomes fascinating. So we do a lot of work with NPS, and I call it a measuring stick instead of a score, using that measuring stick against multiple factors, because that's one of the things, that's that next stage of data analysis, is taking it beyond what's happening with trouble tickets and instead looking at how trouble tickets are impacting something else. How are trouble tickets impacting your bottom line? How are trouble tickets impacting your subscriber experience? One of the customers that we worked with, we found that an incident of a trouble ticket typically made NPS higher because of the connection and the incredible customer service that they were providing. However, when we looked at time to close, we saw that if that went past a day, then the NPS would drop. So as you're thinking about data sources and you're thinking about your collection and analysis strategies, I would encourage you to think about connecting across those buckets. How is this and this working together? And then what kinds of decisions can you make?
Yeah,
Jim,
great
back
point.
to you.
Yeah, great points. And as you said, these are all kind of intertwined, and that's why we came up, when we worked on the survey with your team, we came up with this criteria. We wanted to have a list that incorporated NPS, CSAT, trouble ticket, everything. So yeah, interesting. Okay. So let's talk about data as a network optimizer. As I said, we really wanted to have a broad range of topics to kind of give the research kind of a complete view of the role of analytics and data. And so we wanted to understand which data sources are most important from a network optimization perspective, and really kind of how closely linked are the other various data sources. So let me explain that. So on this slide, we really asked the question, how important do you consider these data sources from a network optimization? Again, we use the same criteria: KPIs, subscriber CSAT, network alarms, subscriber loyalty, and trouble ticket. You can kind of see, based on extremely important responses, KPIs, it's probably not too surprising, because obviously from a network optimization, KPIs are kind of the benchmark for how well the network's performing. So you can kind of see, based on extremely important, 51% said that that's the most important part. And then it drops down to things like 35 subscriber data, which again was usage, take rate, consumption, CSAT, and then 34% alarms, performance, subscriber data, NPS 33, and trouble ticket. What's interesting is they're saying some of these things are really important. And on the previous chart, we saw that they're all different priorities in terms of what they are actually analyzing. So again, that kind of goes back to my other point, that I think they're really only scratching the surface of using the data that they're collecting. And so again, I think it's, KPI is important in the network perspective. So I think that was expected, because it does provide, like I said here, it does provide a granular view of network performance, which is really important for network optimization. But I also wanted to kind of point this orange band of important, the strong level of important, I think, identifies that these data sources are viewed as really valuable, even though only about a third of them even currently analyze this data. So the leader, interesting, in the important category was network alarms and performance data. So I think the takeaway for me is that KPI information is key performance indicators are vital, but all this data is important on some level. That is really kind of a key part from a network perspective. And just really quickly, if I go through the filtering here again, KPIs in all three groups was kind of had the highest ratings in terms of extremely important inputs here. If you go back in trouble ticket data, that was the second place in group 3, but lower scores in group 1 and 2. So there's some subtle differences. Again, I think it's because of the nature of the services, the landscape as a whole myriad of factors here. But what's interesting is the subscriber data scores were higher in both groups 1 and 2, so the smallest and the mid-size, compared to group 3, which was lower. So again, I think it's just another example of again, unique requirements for each different service provider. And again, Sam, maybe I can kind of bring you in here to kind of give us your view of kind of what you're seeing when you talk to some of these BSPs today.
Thank you. So I want to talk about network optimization and seeing your BSP through the eyes of your subscribers, because oftentimes we'll look at alarm data and we'll look at that very much. Again, you're going to hear this theme from me. You'll look at it in a silo. One of our subscribers that we worked with we had usage data, we had network data, and we had subscriber experience data. We had all three of those data sets, and they all related together. And what emerged was a picture that helped the team responsible for network optimization, that there were geographic areas of customers that were suffering in silence. They had high usage, they were gamers, they were high streamers on video, but there was a problem with the network. And then that was being reflected in the voice of the customer data. So we used NPS as a measuring stick, but you can also use trouble ticket information the same way, where you can turn around and say, wow, there's a problem in this area. Let's go fix this area. But it's looking at that data together, created this complete picture of a geo-based issue that particular BSP was able to resolve. And consequently, their NPS went up by a huge amount the next time they did a survey, again, using that as a measuring stick. So it's really interesting looking at network optimization through other lenses. Jim, back to you.
Thanks, Anne. Yeah, great points. Okay, so let's move on and continue our discussion. Let's now focus on the role of data as a business and marketing optimizer. Obviously, data, as we just talked about from a KPI NPS perspective, is important, but clearly all BSPs of all sizes are going to be looking how they can leverage data to really enhance their business and their marketing campaigns. And so those are kind of the questions we want to look at, is what are they currently doing in terms of a business and marketing perspective, and also how will this change in the next 12 to 18 months. I think analytics, and Sam, you probably would agree with me, it's an industry that's moving so quickly. Service levels or service types is very dynamic. So services are changing. So understanding how your customers are using these services is really vital as well. So these two key parts, I think, are important. So the question we ask is, do you currently utilize the following data for making business and marketing decisions? And again, we use the same list from KPI, subscriber data, and you can kind of see here based on what they're currently utilizing. Again, KPI data stands out as 52%. Subscriber data, 40%, subscriber loyalty, NPS, 37. So NPS is now, as we talked about, starting to kind of move up the chain in terms of importance, because it's obviously a key part, as you talked about, Sam, how NPS and data and KPIs are all linked, but it can obviously have an important impact on subscriber loyalty, which is obviously a key part of marketing, minimizing churn, and growing the business. So you can kind of see here, network alarms and trouble ticket, they tend to drop off because they play a key role from a network perspective, from a business and marketing, understanding the reports we're getting, understanding the CSAT, and obviously understanding NPS is all part of that. So to me, the argument I would say here is that KPI can be viewed as extremely important because it tends to be the data that's also most commonly collected and analyzed. So as we saw in the first slide, 52% of them are collecting this data. So clearly the service providers, BSPs, are using the data that they have, and they have a greater source of KPI data. So it kind of makes sense that they would do that. But things like NPS, CSAT, those numbers are important as well. So I do think that, again, that this view, and also this view of what they plan to do, if you look at that orange band, what they plan to utilize in the 12 to 18 months, you can kind of see that, even things like network alarms and NPS, they plan to use that in the next 12 to 18 months, because I think, it's this whole notion of a kind of a holistic view of the network and services and marketing kind of coming together. So I think this slide kind of, to me, reinforces the first slide that shows that there's a lot of value that they're getting from data, but there's a lot more that they'll be able to extract if they commit to, using the more data sources, collecting it and analyzing as well. So those are some interesting parts as well. Again, if we move on to the filtered part of this, you can kind of see KPI data is the most currently utilized in all three filter groups. That's kind of consistent with the research we've just seen. Subscriber data utilization is higher in groups 1 and 2 than in group 3. It's kind of interesting. But a larger group of the group 3 BSPs are utilizing NPS compared to the smaller and the mid-sized ones as well. So again, Sam, I'll give you an opportunity to kind of put your sort of touch on this, your thoughts on when you talk to customers, how are they using data for making business and marketing decisions?
Well, I'm going to give you a very specific example here. We've done over 20 deep relational survey analyses based upon using NPS data along with other business data coming from the BSP. And we had something very interesting emerge, and that is what we're now calling the honeymoon period. So this is something that I want to make sure I share with the audience. If using relational survey data, if you don't pay attention to your subscribers who are beyond that 2 to 3 year period of getting service with you, of connecting with you, you might end up having an issue. And what we found is in study after study after study, that there's about a 2 to 3 year honeymoon period. And that subscriber starts viewing your business as a commodity or a bill to pay. So having some kind of touch point and making sure that your customer service is exceptional, that your operators are aware of these long-term customers is really important. And when you start thinking about this for business and marketing decisions, it becomes really important because you need to understand your customers over time. You would think that they would become more loyal. And what we're seeing is if you don't have programs to support that, then the opposite happens. So I wanted to share that with everybody on this call because it's such an interesting thing of understanding that there's a honeymoon period and it can have a significant impact. So that's an example of marketing decisions and business decisions that's based upon this data. And again, not siloed data. It's data, it's not just the NPS score or the CSAT score, but it's also that overlaid with when was their connect date and what are the trends that we're seeing. It's fascinating, and I wanted to make sure that I shared that with everybody, Jim.
No, that's great. Thank you, Sam. Okay, so let's move on now. Let's talk about use cases. So let's kind of put this into kind of a use case, sort of execution context. Looking at, so we want to understand which data-driven use cases are broadband service providers, BSPs, currently focusing on, and how does this change in the future, or does this change in the future? So this is an important part of the survey as well, because we really want to understand. Again, we've already talked about collection of data and NPS, CSAT, and KPIs. But if you now you have to kind of take this and kind of drill it down and really link it to a number of different use cases. And we came up with a generic group here of churn reduction, pricing strategies, network build out and scale, subscriber acquisition, determine the viability of new service bundles, and network optimization. So you can kind of see here that when we ask them, which of these use cases do they use data analytics for, what are they currently using it for, what are they planning in the next 12 to 18 months, and which ones will they not likely implement or never support as well. And if you kind of look at that blue band, the currently supported, again, churn reduction, pricing strategies, network build out and scale, those are kind of the top three. But one of the key things, whenever we work and look at the data and analyze it in a research context, I always kind of look at sort of what's the spread of the data in terms of the highs to the lows. And you can kind of see, from 23 to 38, that there's a spread there, but 25, 29, 32, 38, there's really four that to me are really important in that context. But you also have to look at the data in the entire context as well. So the first bullet point I put up here is saying, only 38% or less of BSPs currently support what I would consider advanced analytics for use cases like churn reduction, pricing strategies, network build out and scale. So to me, again, it's not to say that they don't provide value. I just think it's just that it's still, the BSPs are still looking at how they leverage this data consistent with the previous charts we've just shown you. But it really shows to me that I do understand that there is some value, because again, if you look at that orange band, which is a 12 to 18 month window, there's a lot that they're planning to do. 45% said that they want to work on churn reduction, 38% on pricing strategies, 53% on network build out and scale, and then 43% for subscriber acquisition, and then 41 and 45 for new service bundles, which we're going to talk about in a minute as well, because it's kind of an interesting view of how you can use analytics for creating new service bundles as well, which a lot of these BSPs have been kind of their foundational marketing strategies as well. And then network optimization. The important thing to me is that if you add all these numbers up, these two bands, you're kind of in the minimum sort of 67% range that, they're using data today, but a third of them, but there's a lot of activity that they expect and forecast they will do to really leverage and monetize this data, and also tie it to use cases, which is a fundamental part of an executive strategy to monetize this data. So there's a lot happening here, and a lot more that's going to be going on in the near future as well. So these are the filter groups. I won't spend too much time here, just to say that in all three filter groups, churn reduction was really the leading one in all three groups. And one of the reasons we filter the data is because we want to understand, our BSPs of different size committed to looking forward at a 12 to 18 month window. Will a larger BSP be more committed to implementing some of these? And you can kind of see that the bands are pretty similar in all three groups. So again, it shows to me that all BSPs of all sizes are really looking at how they can leverage this data and really implement in the next 12 to 18 months. I want to go just pick up the speed here and go a little faster. But as I said on the previous chart, there's a way that data analytics can be leveraged for service bundles as well. So some of the questions we had were how are BSPs utilizing analytics to evaluate service bundles? Can analytics increase service bundle revenue? So it's an important part of this. So we asked this the question was, to what extent do you utilize analytics to measure the effectiveness of the existing new service bundles? And you can kind of see that in a bundling context, they are quite advanced actually. 46%, it's something that they plan to use for new service bundles. They want to use analytics to help them measure the effectiveness of it. And they're using it for 41%. So, that in that blue bar, it's important to read the wording. That's for all service bundles. Whereas if you look at the existing service bundles, 41% are utilizing for all of them, whereas 48% are using some form of analytics for some service bundles. It's clear that BSPs have a broad range and diverse type of service bundles based on marketing requirements, competitive landscape, pricing, everything. So to me, what's really important is that there is a preference to utilize analytics on a really high level here for helping them with their service bundles, both the existing ones and also planned as well. In fact, kind of looking forward these planned new service bundles, it kind of makes sense because these new service bundles have probably different types of services and different types of monetization requirements. So being able to understand analytics, I think, is an important part of that as well. So again, I won't show this too much. I won't spend too much time on this one, but just really the smallest group of BSPs, group one, we're less committed to utilizing analytics for their service bundles, but all three we're kind of looking at how they can, really measure for new service bundles as well. So numbers are a little bit different, but not drastically different as well. So, but also we want to understand, can analytics really improve revenue generation for these existing or these new service bundles? What's interesting is that for existing ones, 56% 55% believe that analytics is extremely valuable for generating from existing service bundles. And I think that's, again, important because these are bundles that are traditionally in the field, generating revenue today, commercially viable. So I think it's really viewed as, maybe, as I said, we talked before about market changing, market forces changing. Being able to leverage analytics, I think, is really important because it helps them maybe modify the existing ones or provide different nuances of the services, how it's delivered. I think that's a kind of a key part of all that as well. Whereas in contracts, maybe because they're still evolving, 29% felt that analytics would really help them, with their new service bundles. But they also viewed it as valuable, 53%. So I think the takeaway here is that for existing service bundles, which are here and now and being commercialized, there's a strong value proposition, but this 53% of planned new service bundles also shows to me that it's still something that's important, that probably in the next 12 to 18 months that they're going to start doing some of this as well. So again, I think it's an important part of their strategy going forward. So let me just talk quickly about the there's sort of the filtering for this. So all three groups, based on extremely valuable, believe that the analytics is important. It's a value proposition for the existing service bundles was in all three groups as well. Focus on that versus the planned ones. And again, Sam, maybe I'll bring you in here and ask you if you've sort of got any sort of customer insights on how this is playing out with the customers you deal with on a daily basis, and what's sort of their sentiment in terms of how they move forward with existing and new service bundles.
Yeah, service bundles is an interesting question. And what we're finding is that when you start looking at your quantitative data, including things like take rates, churn issues, why are people leaving, what's your competitive landscape look like? That's really important. What are your competitors offering? Relational survey data. Many of the customers that we're working with are adding a third or fourth question to their NPS surveys to find out what kinds of services is their market interested in. Adding demographic data that's available through Calix products, adding usage data, that all becomes very, very interesting because you have what you think that you want to offer, but validating that through quantitative data will provide you kind of that lift of more successful service bundles. Base that on data so that you understand your audiences and you are designing for your audiences. Jim, back to you.
Great, thanks, Sam. Interesting. So let's move on a little bit and kind of drill down even a little bit more. So we wanted to understand, we've already seen about some of the use cases about customer loyalty, churn, and so we wanted to understand which capabilities would they utilize for customer experience. Would they use focus groups? Would they use NPS, which we talked about? Would they use customer effort score, CES? Would they use subscriber surveys? And obviously, you can just kind of see here things like subscriber loyalty measurement. There's kind of no real, I would say, perfect score in all of this. But if you look at it in the context of subscriber loyalty management, 62% talked about focus groups, 51% surveys, and then lower down, net promoter scores 21, 21, 11, and 11% for CES. Capabilities related to service bundles, again, subscriber surveys was the second, and the previous one is number one here. But what's interesting is when we look at quality of service experience measurement, again, subscriber scores kind of goes up to the top, but you kind of start to see that NPS scores start to make a real climb. It's only a few points below. So I think, again, it just shows that there's a real focus on being able to leverage a kind of a broad range from focus groups to surveys to NPS and even CES scores as well. So not too surprised, because I think we knew that there's an important part of it. I think overall, I thought, one thing I did think on a heavy reading levels, I did think that CES scores probably would have been a little bit higher in some of these. But again, I think it's just kind of where we are in terms of the industry development and cycle and how they're leveraging analytics and data. But clearly there's, they're talking to customers, they're using focus groups, they're doing surveys. So they're doing the right things there, but I think there's also an opportunity for them to leverage NPS and CES scores. And NPS was a little bit lower in some of the previous charts we talked about what they're actually collecting. If they collected more of that data, then they might be able to use it probably and kind of dovetail it into their whole strategies for loyalty management, things like that. So a lot of moving parts, but it shows that to me, these executives clearly have a strategy in place that they're looking and focusing on as they move forward. Okay, so we also in the survey wanted to include a section about avoiding roadblocks. So what general challenges do BSPs encounter in their data analytics strategy execution? What are these, and what do these fall into the major or minor, and where are they with that? So this is kind of interesting. We asked them to what extent do the following represent challenges to your data analytics driven strategy and service delivery strategy. And we gave them a list of challenges from major challenge to challenge somewhat or not a challenge. And we included lack of interworking between vendor-specific analytic solutions, budget constraints, regulatory restrictions on how to leverage data, lack of executive support, the shift to disaggregated and distributed service, like things like cloud services, or limited in-house data skills as well. So what's interesting here is based on this major challenge, the three leading concerns that kind of stand out are 55% lack of interworking, 40% budget constraints, and 29 regulatory restrictions. But again, the other ones aren't far below. So I think that's interesting. And if you look at the largest, just the orange band, the challenge, 56%, the shift to disaggregated distributed services has got the highest score at 56%. So again, this chart shows to me there's a lot of moving parts going on here in terms of what's happening in the context of data and how they're leveraging it. But interworking is not surprising, number one. Budget constraints in this environment, everybody I think is, how to leverage analytics to monetize and create a positive business case. And regulatory restrictions, I think the whole industry is kind of figuring out on a regulatory what data can be leveraged and how it can be used. So it's interesting because I think it does kind of show that there are some major challenges. But when I look at this and I do a survey, I always look at what's the percentage of major challenge versus a challenge. The challenges are something they can typically recover from or manage. But if I had seen 4 or 5 of these in the 50+ range, I would be concerned about this. But there's obviously always a lead challenge. But the numbers, when they follow to me under 30% as the sort of the 4 out of the 6 do, then I think it shows that there are challenges, but I think they're able to deal with these on a fairly effective level. Again, I won't spend too much time on this one in terms of filtering. You can just kind of see interworking among vendor was the major challenge in group 1 and 2. It attained a 2nd place ranking in group 3. So the larger ones saw it as less of a major challenge. Maybe they have more lab resources or just different historical backgrounds and opportunities. So yeah, there's a couple of subtle differences here, but nothing too drastic. But we also want to ask kind of what we call a future mode of operation question in the statement. That is, do you agree or disagree? And we asked them, do you agree that data quality must improve, that data storage and management costs must come down? Do we need to lower data and storage or retain data in our network? Do we need to expand our analytics and other ecosystems? Do we need to outsource data management? Data storage outsourcing data management is kind of an interesting part. 50%, 56%, a little over half agree with that. And all the rest of these, they totally agree with. 59%, need to expand partnerships and ecosystems. They need to lower storage costs. They need to move to a public cloud, which is interesting, 64%. But at the top of the chain here is 82% said they need to improve data quality. And I think and again, I'm going to bring you back here in a couple of minutes, Sam, to talk about this. But I think to me, this really confirms that I think that analytic strategies are going to really follow this evolution path. They need to do a better job of improving data quality of what they do collect. Like I said, there's a lot of data they're collecting but not analyzing, but if they do move into the analyzing mode, then they need to make sure that the data is solid and level set and foundationally right. But they also need to lower costs as well and even look at public cloud storage. So there's a lot of different moving parts here. And if we look at the filters for this one, outsourcing just kind of stepped, to me sort of stood out. Outsourcing really varies based on the DSP size. Only 45% of the largest group 3 agree that their outsourcing is necessary. 59 and 65 of the smaller and the mid-sized group would consider that. So again, a lot of different moving parts based on size of the company, again, the landscape and services and a whole range of different factors. But again, Sam, let's kind of bring you in here to kind of give us your thoughts on some of this.
Well, especially when you look at this slide and then what we were looking at previously in terms of analytic strategies, Calix products are exceptional at building analytics into those products. And there are other products that are out there, your billing systems, exceptional processes built into those products for reporting and for analytics. that challenge is moving it out of those silos and bringing it together in terms of the future way that you should be working with your analytics, because that's where it really comes in. I find a lot of our BSPs will say, we don't have the data quality that we need. Well, it's really, the issue is not, Jim, the data quality. It's that ability to connect data from one application to another application. Or it could be we need to solve storage issues. Again, it's the same type of thing. I think what's really important is that Business Insights here at Calix was formed exactly to address data's fragmented and in silos, thereby quality questions come into play, and also a lack of resources. So one of the things that you're going to want to think about is, how are you going to invest? Are you going to use third-party organizations such as Business Insights? Are you going to build up that data analytics muscle inside of your own organizations? Moving data out of those silos and learning how to work with it is the most important thing. Does that mean that you need to build a data warehouse? Not necessarily. There are different ways to approach that. But what's really important is understanding the sophistication of your data, where it's sitting, and how does it relate together, because that's the future mode of operating. Do you have any questions that you have for me about that?
Me? No, I think you're right. I think in a lot of different ways, like you said, it's there's so many decision points in terms of data fragmentation, and I think maybe that's why these scores for the public cloud storage model, maybe they think that that's a way for them to handle this. It's cost effective, gives them unlimited scale, helps them with data fragmentation, but in some respects it doesn't. They just kind of have to me, in my view, they have to kind of work through some of these different models. Yeah.
I always tell people, start with your questions. What do you need to learn? What are those key questions? And then turn around and say, do we have the data to answer those questions? You probably do. Do we have the data to talk together, to bring it comprehensively together to answer those questions? You probably don't, because it's sitting there in these application silos.
Yeah, no, exactly. And fragmentation kind of stood out in the previous one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So in kind of the last section of the survey, we wanted to understand about what additional analytics capabilities do BSPs need to help them in these changing business and network requirements, and when will they implement these? For the sake of time, I'm going to go through these a little quicker than the previous section, and I want to give some time to Sam for her presentation. But we just asked them, what are sort of must-haves, nice-to-haves, or not necessary capabilities. We included a real list here of things like AI-based tools and policies, real-time data analysis and response, no-code data analysis techniques, or open standards. And it probably not too surprising, AI as a must-have stood out. And I think that's part of the the whole requirements to be able to move these services. So I think again, I look at the gray scores and not necessary. At the end of the day, all four of them had low, not necessary. I think it's kind of what's standing out now is, for whatever reason, AI is kind of viewed as a market must-have, even though I think the whole AI market is, in a lot of ways, is still evolving and trying to be defined. But there's no question that the industry and these executives really see it as having a lot of potential as they move forward. So I won't spend too much time on this, but again, just to say that all three groups ranked AI as a must-have. Was surprisingly, even the smallest group, one of BSPs, they gave it the highest scores of 59%. So, but again, the trends are similar, but again, it's service providers of all sizes really understand how analytics is how AI-based tools is going to really help them with their changing business and network requirements. So the last question is, when do they plan to purchase these capabilities? Again, this is pretty similar based on the previous chart in terms of, they're already purchasing or have already purchased some form of this, or purchasing now or purchase at some point. So, AI-based tools and policies, it's, I think of what you're buying today in terms of AI-based tools and policies today versus what you're going to buy in 5 years from now is going to be completely different. But it's fair that there are some programs and capabilities out there that they can buy today. But again, it just shows that these BSPs are really looking to take their priorities and purchase them. But to purchase them in the next 12 to 18 months is also a key point as well. So again, I think it's just an important part of all that. So let me just kind of move quickly to the filtering and just kind of talk a little bit about that. Is interesting. When we worked in the survey, I thought the largest group of the VSPs, they would be the ones that had likely purchased these AI-based tools, and it's completely correct. 52% said they've already purchased something, compared to 39 and 43% of the smaller and the mid-sized groups. But purchasing now banned for the smallest and the mid-sized is also there as well. So again, it shows that VSPs of all sizes really understand and get kind of the view of what they're doing with AI and how they'll move forward with it. So just to really summarize, I think, we've gone through, for the audience, we've gone through a lot of data points in a pretty compressed period, but I think just want to leave you a couple of key takeaways that we're going to talk about. And that is, it's clear that the C-levels agree that things like improving data quality, lowering data costs and storage costs, expanding ecosystems, or even maybe outsourcing data mesh to a third party is something that they need to consider. But if we step back from that today, I think most importantly, I think to me, what really shows is that I think BSPs do have room to expand and what I call it fortify their analytics strategies. They're analyzing 58% or less of the data, even though they believe that many other data sources are valuable. But again, it shows that they are taking steps in the next 12 to 18 months to increase the amount of data that they are going to use for specific use cases. Things like network build out, churn reduction, these are all important, but there's a lot of important parts of this as well. But I think the other part is that in terms of the future must-have capabilities, AI-based tools and policy is important. That's not to say that other things like real-time data analysis, no code, these are not important. It's just, I think, analytics in data and is really an excellent match for AI-based tools. And as we start to see, a lot of these broadband service providers will start to purchase these capabilities, and they'll be doing so a lot more in the next 12 to 18 months. So the key takeaway here, I think, is from the survey that we did and the research that we did with Calix, analytics has really established a strong value proposition, and I think it's really only going to grow as we move forward in the next 12 to 18 months and beyond that as we start to integrate AI-based capabilities. So I'll give you maybe a couple minutes here, Sam, to kind of wrap this up, and then you can present your presentation on the consulting. So maybe any sort of key takeaway from you?
Well, I'm going to share a story. I recently sat in on a final consultation that we did with a customer where they really wanted to understand their call center practices and move to best practices because it directly impacted their KPIs and their bottom line. And so we did a deep dive with the permissions of the staff for their call centers, and we surveyed them to understand how were they using Calix-based educational tools so that they really understood how to use Calix applications. We use Calix's AI that is there and built into our products. We also had them pull their AI-based information coming from their calls because they had invested in that. So we brought all of this data together to give them a really complete picture of what's happening inside of their call center operations, all the way from how to optimize for certain calls to understand what was the most effective training. And this turns around and it creates that happier customer, which turns around and it reduces churn and it increases take rates. So understanding all of this information and what AI is starting to do for us is incredible. I'm personally using AI-based tools to analyze our consults that we deliver so that we understand what is the most meaningful for our BSPs as we deliver our consults. What are the findings that create the most response? So AI is the future, but I will say that we are in the infancy of what AI can do to deal with fragmented data. But if you can pull this information together, now it becomes fascinating what you can do.
Great, thank you. Okay, great points. Okay, so we have a couple minutes left, and what I wanted to do is, Sam, you wanted to give you a few minutes to talk a little bit about Calix's program in terms of business insight service. So I push your first slide out. Just please go ahead.
So Business Insight Services, again, this is leveraging the power of your Calix cloud and business data. We are a consultative organization that Calix has invested in. Right now, one of the most popular products or offerings that we have is a subscriber loyalty analysis. If you don't have an NPS program, we help you build one. If you do, we will do a deep dive on that NPS data, and we'll do exactly what I've been talking about. We'll turn around and take your business data that exists in silos, we bring it together, and we give you a deep understanding of what the stories are that that data has to tell you, and an action plan that's built with your customer success teams to move forward. Going to the next slide. What do we deliver? We deliver pre-engagement processes on data collection to send to our team, educational sessions, and then we do our analysis. We deliver it in advance. We do a consultation helping our executives understand what those data stories are. Our customer success team weaves that into their action plans. And then what happens at post-analysis is you'll receive that consultation recording, and you'll be working with your customer success managers to move forward. Going to the next slide. It sounds really big. It's not. Most of this effort happens on the business insights team's shoulders. It's about an 8-hour customer effort to do a subscriber loyalty analysis. That includes launching the survey and going to both the discovery and the consultation sessions. It's about an 8 to 10 week process. Low effort on the BSP side, higher effort on business insights. What do you get out of it? Those action plans that help you make decisions. And to find out more, if you go to the next slide, all you'll need to do is respond to the poll that's coming up, and then we will be in touch with you. It's a simple consult to find out more about what my team does, and we'd love to speak to you. We have some really interesting questions, so I think what we should do is take on some of those questions, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thanks, Sam. So yeah, so we have some time up here for some questions. Just gonna go, just bear with me here for a second. Okay, this question is kind of interesting. You know, and we've seen this in the survey results, that there are some companies that are still, I would say, just beginning or embarking on their data analytics journey, and it's a kind of one I see in a number of different webinars. It's similar, but it's important to say, you know, companies are kind of new on their data analytics journey. Where do you recommend they start? What are some of the first steps that they need to kind of set them up for success as they kind of execute their strategy down the road?
Jim, I want to take a stab at this, because I think what's really important is that as a data practitioner, I call myself a data practitioner. Early on in my career, I immediately would move to what's the report or the dashboards that I need to produce, without doing a discovery of what questions do you need answered. A strong data analytics program, whether you're beginning or whether you're mature, should be starting with, what do you need to know? What are the hypotheses that you want to test? What are the assumptions that you want to validate or disprove? What kinds of things do you want to do in your business to drive it forward? And then design your analytics strategy around those things. Prioritize what you need to know first. And now you have an analytics strategy that supports your business. I can't tell you how much in my early career I built dashboards that nobody visited, because they weren't answering the questions that the business needed to have answered.
Yeah,
so ask those questions first.
Okay, I think that's important, because like you said, I mean, on some level, networks have been, you know, any sort of network operator, service provider has been collecting data on the network for years. But it's kind of like you said, this next step to be able to sort of look and tie into sort of a business or marketing, you know, campaign or strategy, how you kind of tie that all together and how you link. And you had an interesting example about net promoter scores and network performance and marketing. they're kind of all intertwined, right? And ultimately they can even impact churn. So there's a lot of different moving parts to this. So room for time for maybe 2 more questions. This one says, I'm going to kind of paraphrase it. Basically, and we talked about some of the challenges that BSPs are having, and this is kind of more for you, Sam. It's, what challenges have you kind of experienced when it comes to implementing data analytics strategies or working with customers on their data analytics strategy? You just talked about what they should do, the companies, to start their journey, but what challenges have you seen? We had a whole list of them here, from complexity, executive support, regulatory, network, vendor. What do you kind of see as, when you kind of do a drill down with these on a consult of some of these clients of yours? What do you kind of see that is there a group or a type of different challenges that kind of stand out for you?
I think the most important thing is that when you're trying to learn about your business through data, and you start forming the data stories, it's alignment across organizations. It doesn't matter whether it's a large organization or a small organization. What I'm finding more and more is that when everybody sits in the room together and learns together, that's when the magic starts happening. I have learned to be brief, to do executive briefing and make sure that the important parts are highlighted first. We have learned, get all leaders into the room together to learn together around these strategies. So having a process where you review your KPIs together, where you talk about them together and align together on next steps, that's when magic happens. That is the most important thing. It's sending out a business report or sending out a dashboard and asking each leader in your organization to look at it in a silo. Just like data can sit in silos, so can those data stories, and then they don't go anywhere. Alignment amongst your team is the most important thing. Do it together, talk about it together, learn together.
Okay, yeah, it's an interesting point. Again, like you said, you could build dashboards that people weren't using because they hadn't made sort of the mental connection between the data, between these different dashboards and things like that. Yeah.
Early on, my most impactful dashboard that I've ever built at that point in time in my life was an operational dashboard to understand opportunities for, I was a Salesforce expert and I used the Salesforce platform, and opportunities that were stalled that were high value. And that dashboard came up during the sales call, the weekly sales call, and that became actionable because we got rid of all the noise and we just talked about these high impact, really important deals that were stalled. And I learned, start basing your analytics strategy based upon what the company needs to know. Then it becomes a game changer.
Okay, great. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. We've got, I think, less than a minute left. So first of all, Sam, excellent insights. Thanks for joining me and presenting today some of this. The research was a really interesting project for me in terms of understanding what are all the moving parts to this. And I think the research gives a really an important and vital view of where BSPs are with their data collection and analytics strategies. And thank you for joining us and providing your insights into sort of the real world customer experience part of all that. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And also, I'd like to thank the audience for attending today's session. As the operator said at the very beginning, there's a survey that's open on your platform, on your user interface. If you can provide us input into today's session, that'll help us plan for future sessions. So for light reading, this is Jim Hodges. Thanks everyone for attending today. And again, thank you, Sam and Calix for sponsoring today's session. Thanks everyone.